Are we on? We are on. Good morning, comrades. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this wonderful morning. As we have said, we'll be here to deliver a paper titled Lamenting the Future We Were Robbed, Rethinking the Fall of the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League. Now, before we get into our discussion, comrades, we need to be clear and echo the calls by national and provincial governments. Comrades, coronavirus is a very dangerous disease. We can tell it's devastating first world countries in Europe and in America. Therefore, please stay at home, wash your hands with soap for a minimum of 20 seconds and do so regularly, and keep all the lockdown regulations, and so that we can assist our government to flatten the curve. Now, secondly, male comrades, let us stop abusing our women. Let us stop abusing our women. The cases reported for domestic violence ever since the lockdown are way more than the cases of coronavirus. It means as men we are more dangerous to our women than this COVID-19. Then we should sit down. This time is time for us to actually sit down, reflect, and think about how much harm are we causing to our women. They live in fear because of us. So let us stop embarking and engaging on gender-based violence. The cases are just too many. 87,000 in just a matter of a couple of days is way too much. Now, going back into our paper, the paper we'll be discussing was written by myself. I've been failing to engage comrades, so I thought this is the perfect time for me to engage comrades with this particular paper. It's a paper I wrote last year on the 11th of April 2019. It's entitled Lamenting the Future We Were Robbed, Rethinking the Fall of the Rethinking the Fall of the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League. So for the purposes of our discussion, this is what we'll be discussing. We'll discuss the general nature of the African National Congress Youth League. We'll discuss the cause of the fall of the 24th NEC. We'll discuss historic intergenerational relationships that have inform us of the attitude of Congress towards its ANC youth leaguers and its youth leaders in particular. Fourthly, we'll discuss the role of President Jacob Zuma in the fall of the 24th NEC. And lastly, we'll discuss the aftermath post disbandment, post the expulsion and suspension of leadership. Now, we are not going to discuss into detail, comrades, the formation of the ANC Youth League, where it comes from, the various epochs. We'll touch on that. But then I think comrades have already done that. We also have been following the online political lectures. I think Machike yesterday, Itsekiso Machike, touched that fundamental and did a fantastic job. There's no need for us to do that. So we'll be concentrating on the purposes of from 2012 up until today. We'll touch on a number of historic events. We'll touch on an event of the 40s, we'll touch on the event of the 60s, and we'll touch on an event of the 90s when we are discussing the intergenerational relationships that have informed the attitude of Congress towards its youthful leaders. Now, first and foremost, the African National Congress Youth League is primarily a preparatory school of the ANC. What does that mean in simple language? It means the ANC, from the ANC Youth League, receives its leaders and its members. Not just leadership only, but and its members. Now, the ANC Youth League, therefore, is a factory of leadership. It produces leadership. It produces membership for the African National Congress. If you see the ANC in a state whereby the membership do not resonate with the values or the cultures of the ANC Youth League ought to blame. Where were they when those particular leaders emerged? Because historically, the role of producing leaders for the African National Congress is solely the responsibility of the ANC Youth League, and it ought to do that jealously and guard those duties and guard that responsibility jealously. So first and foremost, we discuss the importance of discussing the ANC Youth League in 2020 is because, number one, we are discussing with future leaders. We're discussing about future leaders, discussing about future membership of the African National Congress. Secondly, above being a preparatory school of the African National Congress, the ANC Youth League is a critical body of opinion within the ANC, informed by its twin task. Now, the twin tasks of the African National Congress Youth League are very simple, and I believe every member of the ANC Youth League ought to know them and ought to have some sort of resonance with the twin task. Now, the twin tasks are clear. They say the primary duty of the African National Congress is to recruit young people into the ANC and then be the voice of young people within the ANC while simultaneously championing their socio-economic interest. Those are the twin tasks of the ANC. The twin tasks themselves, therefore, put the ANC Youth League in a position whereby they ought at all material times to give critical opinions on matters in the ANC representing young people. Therefore, when you see the ANC with an anti-youth posture, when you see the ANC with the posture that seeks not to pursue or to champion the interest of young people, we ought to blame the African National Congress Youth League, because historically and organizationally, the duties of championing issues of young people within the ANC primarily lies within the Congress Youth League. That is the second point why we should be discussing the ANC Youth League in the current time and stage. Now, lastly and importantly, why we ought to be while discussing the general nature and the character of the ANC Youth League is the ANC Youth League, we are taught, is the harbinger of the future of the ANC. Now, society has youth. The youth you see in society are a harbinger of the future of that society. Therefore, the ANC Youth League, in its current form and its state, is the harbinger of the future of the African National Congress. So we ought to be concerned, the state and nature of the ANC Youth League ought to concern us, because that particular state and form it might one way or another affect us organizationally, because as future members and leaders of the African National, as the youth, we represent the harbinger of the African National Congress, the complexion of its membership and the outlook of its leadership. Therefore, it ought to concern us as young people. Whenever we start discussing politics, primarily we ought to start with discussing the African National Congress Youth League, because we are discussing the future. Now, secondly, we want to discuss the cause of the fall of the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League. In discussing that, we ought to discuss the outlook of the 24th NEC. Now, the 24th NEC had a rather militant outlook, and it was rather a very militant structure. It was radical, and Youth League generally are radical and are militant, but the 24th NEC took the radicalism to extra heights and new heights, and as such, it had to step on toes of many other people, and that includes and not limited to old people in the ANC and capital as such. So, besides being militant and radical, the very 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League had gained serious confidence of the young people of South Africa. Young South Africans find serious resonance and related with the 24th NEC. In the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League, South Africans had found a tool to agitate the status quo. In the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League, young South Africans had found an instrument to pursue the agenda of transformation, in particular economic transformation. The parade generation and economic freedom wearing t-shirts, economic freedom in a lifetime wearing t-shirts, actually had become undisputed spokesperson of the youth of their generation, and the youth accepted them as such. Now, this led to them having a program of action which can be viewed in the words of Fanon as their generational mission, because Frantz Fanon informs us that out of relative opacity, each generation must discover its mission, betray it or fulfill it. Therefore, viewing the 24th NEC, they had discovered their own generational mission. Their generational mission, they said, is economic freedom in their lifetime. And achieving that economic freedom in their lifetime, they were clear they wanted to expropriate land without compensation. They wanted to nationalize mines. They wanted to nationalize banks, including the South African Reserve Bank. And these were talks which were quite new in South Africa. They were not necessarily new, but the tempo they were pushed with was quite amazing and caused a lot of panic. Capital in itself was very much uncomfortable with this particular talks. Monopoly capital enjoying the monopoly in mines, the monopoly in banking, and having so much land being distributed to a few. That favors capital. It creates an environment of comfortability to capital. Then comes the 24th NEC to agitate that status quo. No, you cannot be having all of these things. We are coming to take them and we are going to disperse them to our people. That created a serious uncomfortability to capital. You know why? Because capital understood that this is the ANC Youth League, the future of the ANC. So one way or another, if this is their program of action, this will be pursued and this will be achieved, and our monopoly will be destroyed and will be disturbed. And because of that, capital had to strike back. You cannot poke capital in the face and capital sits back and does not retaliate. Capital always finds a way of retaliating, and capital retaliated in this particular regard. Capital retaliated because the African National Congress, as they tell us, is a broad church. So there is no particular dominant ideology within the ANC. You find everyone in the ANC. And therefore, capital has its agents within the ANC. They are representatives of big business within the ANC. And those agents of big business had to do something on behalf of capital. And the best thing that had to be done was to obliterate the ANC Youth League by suspending the leadership, by expelling the leadership, by disbanding in totality the NEC. So this was not done because there's a political, it was not a political agenda. The ANC Youth League 24th NEC was sacrificed in the altar of capital, in the altar of profit. Comrades, there is no, if that is not the case, then someone has to answer the question for us. Was capital not intimidated by the posture, the outlook, the radicalism, the militancy of the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League? And if the answer is the affirmative, then you are agreeing with me that capital was uncomfortable, capital was agitated, and capital had to retaliate. And it retaliated using comrades of the African National Congress, and in the process robbed us of our future. Now, our point number 3, we want to discuss about intergenerational relationships, and we are going to start in the 1940s. We hear there's a tale being told here about Comrade J.P. Marx, who was the provincial president of the ANC in the Transvaal in the 1940s, and who was also the general secretary of the South African Communist Party. He was meant to go address in a particular meeting, The ANC Youth League heard of that, or no, the man's going to address. The ANC Youth League decided, no, we are going to go disturb them, because there was antagonisms by that time between the ANC Youth League and the South African Communist Party. The ANC Youth League, the 44th generation, believed that the South African Communist Party was a vehicle by white people to hijack the national liberation struggle. So they were very antagonistic towards the South African Communist Party, and as such they decided that Uncle JP Marks must be disrupted in that meeting was planning to address. So Nelson Mandela was deployed, and he went there to go agitate and disrupt that particular meeting to be addressed by JP Marks. When he got there, he pulled the anarchy of the ANC Youth League. You know, our anarchy, stood on top of the table, shouted and made all of this noise and all of this and casted aspersions and all of these other things. This means of disturbing a particular meeting. Uncle JP Marks responded with political acumen and prowess that left the young Nelson Mandela tamed. Now, he responded and engaged with Mandela, and Mandela could not respond back. He was found speaking gibberish. He was lost. Instead of disrupting the meeting, he found himself subjected to the teachings of Uncle JP Marks. History tells us that from that particular meeting, the antagonisms between the South African Communist Party and the African National Congress Youth League subdued, because Uncle JP Marks rose above the parapet and actually instead of meeting Nelson Mandela with his own medicine, he rose and provided political acumen and responded with political prowess. Now, nowadays, if a young person is sent to disrupt a meeting of the old guard would respond by sending you thugs to Muriu. The old guard will respond by subjecting you to disciplinary hearings. The old guard will respond by ostracizing, by isolating you, and by making sure that you stay as far as possible from the organization as possible. Now, these are lessons that we get from history. Now, another important thing, that Mandela, in the process of going to disrupt it, and when was engaged by JP Marks, and he saw the acumen and the superior logic that was being brought by Uncle JP Marks, Comrade Nelson Mandela responded with learning. America Cabral tells us that we should learn at all material times as young people. Learn from our books, learn academics, learn from the revolution. We ought to learn at all material times. Even Lenin echoes that call, says the truth of young people is to learn. And Nelson Mandela did just that. He learned, he allowed himself to learn. He did not take the anarchy that he was sent with and took it to head, but then he subdued the anarchy and put himself in a position of learning. And from that particular encounter, Nelson Mandela growed, and the anti-communist sentiments that he used to share with his peers, history tells us that from that particular encounter, they were not to be found as much as they were before. The outcome of all of this is funny also, that JP Marks allowed the very same Nelson Mandela that was sent to disrupt him to succeed him as the provincial president of the Transvaal ANC. Nowadays, comrades would not allow you to do that. Once you are sent to disrupt them, they will not teach you. They will retaliate with showing you flames. They will show you to what we call in Mpumalanga makwaba. You are going to subject it to humiliation. You are going to be ostracized. You are going to be divorced from the organization, and there is absolutely no way you are going to give any chance to succeed that particular individual you were sent to disrupt. So Nelson Mandela eventually succeeded Comrade JP Marks, and when the antagonisms between the South African Communist Party and the African National Congress, we saw them dissipated from that particular end, and that benefited the movement. As a sign, when Nelson Mandela left to Algeria for training in 1962, he left as per resolution of the South African Communist Party, and it had made all the means and arrangements. Now, the second intergenerational relationship I want to talk about is between OR Tambo and Comrade Krizan. In 1968, Comrade Krizan co-authored a memorandum which was rather controversial. He was from the front lines of battles. He had fought in 1967 in Wenki. He had fought in 1968 in Spolilo. He was arrested subsequently and jailed in Botswana. When he came back, he wrote a memorandum along with 7 other comrades. There were 8 in total, registering their dissatisfaction with the leadership of the movement, the leadership of the ANC, the leadership of the Communist Party, the leadership of the MK in totality. The comrades were saying these comrades are relaxed while comrades were suffering in the front lines. These comrades had seen battle, had encountered battle, and the command structures had not been into battle, and these comrades felt that the command structures did not take this thing serious. So they wrote a very sharp memorandum arguing against the leadership and the command structures. The outcomes of that particular memorandum is, as history records, the disciplinary committee of MK fined Hani guilty of misconduct and fined Hani guilty of sowing of attempting to sow rebellion amongst the troops in the bases, and and character assassination against the leadership. They responded that no, this man must be executed. He must be executed. He's mad. But then, before you executed someone in the MK, it had to pass through President Tambo. President Tambo heard of the initial decision that comrades wanted to actually execute Comrade Chris. Comrade Tambo came and intervened. He intervened and made sure that no one gets expelled, no one gets executed, and Tambo intervened. From that exercise, from Tambo's intervention, what comes after is the 1969 Morogoro Conference that assisted the tempo and the momentum of the organization in the fight against the oppressive apartheid government. Now, they could have done so many things. Tambo could have also come and say, no, this Chris is mad, he's speaking against us, let's execute him, let him be expelled, let him do this. But then Tambo did not do that. Remember, Tambo and Nelson Mandela appears, they are of the same generation. Probably Tambo had knew of the encounter that happened between J.P. Marx and the very radical Nelson Mandela, and they understood that Nelson Mandela could have suffered the very same fate that these comrades wanted to subject Comrade Chris to, and instead Comrade J.P. Marx rose above the occasion. So Tambo, even in this particular case, rose above the occasion and spared the life of Comrade Chris, and in doing so assisted the movement and gave it momentum by giving it a very radical foot soldier in the form of Comrade Chrisani. Lastly, the issue of O.R. Tambo versus President Peter Mokaba. According to this book, comrades, according to this book, Askari by Jacob Zuma, in the last chapter, on the last 2 chapters, in the late 80s, in the late 80s, 89s, early 90s, Comrade Peter Mokaba was once suspected by Imbowodo of being a spy of the apartheid regime. He was marshaled to Lusaka in Zambia. He got there, he was interrogated, he was arrested, he was tortured. And President Tambo heard of it in his veil-frayed moments and again intervened and spared the life of Peter Mokaba and ensured that no man stood against the desires and his political ambitions, and no man stood against his capacity, and he spared the life of Mokaba and ensured that his politics continue to see the light of day. So that these particular relationships, these 3 relationships between J.P. Marx and Nelson Mandela, between O.R. Tambo and Chrisani, and O.R. Tambo and Peter Mokaba, gives us an idea of the attitude that Congress has towards its own radical young people and its own youth leaders. Now this leads me to my 4th point, the role of President Jacob Zuma. We're going to say Comrade Jacob Zuma knows very well of the encounter between J.P. Marx and Nelson Mandela. Why do I say so? In 2015, when the South African government were taking back were just received the bodies, the remains of JP Marks and of JP Marks in 2015, these comrades, Jacob Zuma tells the tale. He's the one who tells us the story of JP Marks. He's the one who tells the tale of how JP Marks used this political acumen to tame Nelson Mandela. So Jacob Zuma, President Jacob Zuma, understood very well the attitude the organization has towards its young people. Also, Comrade Jacob Zuma also knows that young people are naturally more radical than older people. He was a radical young person. He got arrested and was sentenced to 10 years before he was 20 years old. So he was radical. Now, the role, what was President Jacob Zuma supposed to do? President Jacob Zuma, we charge that he was supposed to act as President Tambo acted in the case of Peter Mokaba. As President Tambo acted in the case of Comrade Krizani. In both those instances, comrades had decided against the fate of these young leaders, but the president of the ANC came and overturned those decisions because he's the political head. We charge that President Jacob Zuma had the same responsibility when it came to Julius Malema. That, listen, this young person might be radical, this young person might be agitating the status quo, this young person might be doing all of these other things that we think that we may deem unorthodox as old people. But then this young person is the future of the African National Congress, and we ought to guide him, we ought to make sure that he grows, we ought to nurture his politics and ensure that he uses this capacity of his to benefit the national democratic forces. So at the end of the day, we are saying Comrade Jacob Zuma failed young people of South Africa in their times of need. In our darkest hour, when our leaders were subjected to disciplinary hearings, when our leaders were subjected to expulsions, when our organization was disbanded and we were left with no one to speak on our behalf, Comrade Jacob Zuma stood there and did nothing to intervene. Matter of fact, history records he speaks later on after the disbandment. He speaks and he proudly calls the expelled president of the ANC Youth League that he was uhlanya lomfana. Wafika uhlanya lomfana. Hey uhlanya lomfana. This means that Comrade President Jacob Zuma did not have any interest but then the interest of securing his own politics, of securing his own term of office, of securing whatever power he wanted to secure, and impress capital in whatever way by sacrificing the African National Congress Youth League and its leaders. We're saying Comrade President Zuma was supposed to have intervened as Tambo has intervened. Comrade President Zuma saw Tambo very closely. Comrade Zuma was sentenced with President Nelson Mandela. Comrade President Zuma is one of the working libraries of our movements. He knows exactly the attitude of the Congress movement towards its young leaders. He knows how patient the movement is when it comes to intergenerational tensions and the management of the contradictions that comes from intergenerational interest and so forth. So Comrade President Zuma failed us as young people of the country. He failed us. He could have stopped what happened. He could have intervened, as history tells us how Tambo continuously and many times intervened on behalf of young people of the ANC. Now, with that said, comrades, yes, we are charging that Comrade Zuma could have done more than what he did, but Comrade Zuma was an accomplice to the death and the murdering of the African National Congress Youth League. Lastly, comrades, we want to discuss the aftermath of the disbandment. The ANC Youth League is a caricature, is a shadow of its former self. It is a joke, it is irrelevant, it does not seem to have a future. If the ANC Youth League indeed is the harbinger of the future of the ANC, then the ANC does not have a future considering the outlook of the ANC Youth League. Yes, there came the 25th ANC Youth League led by Colleen Maine and Secretary General Zuma. But then, comrades, with that ANC Youth League of those comrades was irrelevant. Was rather too obeisance. It was too obedient. It was too obsequious. It subjected itself to the will of all people in such a way that compared to the African National Congress Youth League, the 24th ANC, this is a joke. Young people do not find resonance with this ANC Youth League. Young people do not know the ANC, do not relate to the ANC Youth League, because of ever since the disbandment. Therefore, comrades, we are saying the 25th ANC Youth League is arguably the worst of all the 25 NECs that have existed. It is in the bottom. It has not defined its program of action. It failed to represent young people. It was self-serving. It had many young people within it which were very capable. But then remember, these are young people who emerged even the ticket of impressing old people. The 25th Congress was orchestrated, was drafted, it was planned and executed by the old guard. Young people were just pawns in this game, and by just being there, they contributed, they became accomplices also to this particular crime. So the ANC Youth League was not killed without our assistance. The ANC Youth League was killed by our assistance. To show the hostility we had, comrades, what happened to Comrade Ronald Lamola in 2015 ought to be seen in this particular light. It ought to be seen as us young people participating in the process of choking to death the ANC Youth League, sacrificing what is tried and tested with what is unknown, because perhaps what the unknown was going to serve our personal interest and advance what we as individuals would like to benefit, maybe pecuniary, politic, or any other form of gain. Therefore, comrades, ever since the disbandment of the ANC Youth League, the 24th NEC, the ANC Youth League has been a shadow of itself. It's in a very shameful state. The NYTT is not a true reflection of the young people of the country. The NYTT will not speak on behalf of young people of the country because most of them are not young. They do not understand our agitation to the status quo. They would not convey it. Actually, they would use their ticket in the NYTT to further their own personal political interest. It is in the best interest of young people, therefore, that we go back to the basics and rethink about the ANC Youth League that we want to have. And basically, we need to go back and restart again from what was stolen from us. The 24th NEC was going to change the complexion completely of the country. Now, why do I say so? I say so because in Parliament in 2017 in Nasrec, the ANC took resolutions which reflected or ricocheted the resolutions taken by the 24th NEC of the ANC Youth League in Galaga in 2011. We talk of the nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank, which is a policy of the ANC today. Before that, it was the policy of the ANC Youth League. Now, these policies continue to find space. They still carry their own momentum without the leadership. They carry their own momentum without the organization. How much impact would and difference would it have been to the movement and to the country had we left the 24th NEC Youth League intact and offered political education instead of expulsion and suspension, and offered political guidance and enlightened them? Because in the process, we've created an ANC Youth League which is fearful. An organization right now, the 25th NEC, the environment within the 25th NEC Youth League was pervaded by fear. Now, Anton Lambert says the African National Congress Youth League is an organization where young men and young women will meet and exchange ideas in an atmosphere pervaded by the common hatred of oppression. Now, the 25th NEC met in an atmosphere that was pervaded by fear. They feared the old guard that were responsible of putting them there. They feared what if they spoke out loudly against the interest of the old guard, they would suffer the same fate as the 25th and as the 24th NEC. Subsequently, they were disbanded by being fearful. So, comrades, this should give us a time to reflect that if we want an ANC that is going to survive for another 108 years, we are going to need an ANC Youth League which is sober, which is radical, which is militant, whereby young people, general young people of society, are going to look at the ANC Youth League and find resonance with it. They're going to see the ANC Youth League as a tool to agitate the status quo, whereby young people are going to see the ANC Youth League as an instrument to transform the lives of the marginalized South Africans in general, blacks in general and Africans in particular. So, comrades, I think I would pause there at this particular moment, and this is what we've discussed. We've discussed the nature of the ANC Youth League and its character. We've discussed the cause of defaults. We've discussed the historic intergenerational relationships that informs the attitude of Congress towards young people. We've discussed the role of Comrade Jacob Zuma in the fall of the 24th NEC, and we've discussed the aftermath, how irrelevant the ANC Youth League is, and how obsequious and obeisant and obedient and subservient was the 25th NEC, and that further led the ANC Youth League further down the road of irrelevance. I think we are going to continue engaging. We'll check on your comments, we'll engage with comments, but for this particular moment, comrades, we want to encourage you. Let's do these videos, let's talk, let's engage, let's start the culture of engaging. Let's not frown upon opinions raised by comrades. Let's discuss, let's not be intimidated. We are young lions, we are the future, and no one can stop us. Thank you very much, comrades, for